Welcome to the Wellness Lab Digest, where we help you to absorb powerful, life-changing insights from top wellness experts with our daily, bite-sized wellness podcast summaries. Each episode is packed with distilled, powerful takeaways to boost your health and well-being. To support this podcast, please scroll down on whatever app you're listening on. Ratings and reviews are helpful. Even better, just send the show to a friend. Or check out our sponsors at the bottom of the page, or simply click the Support the Show link.
Welcome back, everyone, to another deep dive. This time, we're looking into something a listener sent our way.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's this fascinating interview with Dr. Giles Yeo. You familiar with him at all?
The name rings a bell. Is he the geneticist?
Yeah, he studies the connection between our brains and food, like why we crave what we crave.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I've seen his stuff. Really interesting work.
Exactly. And that's what we're diving into today. We'll be looking into those oh-so-tempting ultra-processed foods.
Right.
And also trying to understand, why losing weight can feel so impossible sometimes.
Yeah, like you're doing everything right, but...
It's like you're fighting your own body.
Mm-hmm.
So Dr. Yeo talks about this.
He does, yeah. He kind of debunks that whole idea that it's just calories in, calories out.
Right. Which, let's be honest, we hear that everywhere. But it's way more complicated.
Way more. Dr. Yeo points out how much genetics matter. Our hormones, our environment.
Even our brain circuitry, it's all connected.
It really is. Like, he uses this example of lentils. Okay, they're nutritious, they're affordable.
They're supposed to be the perfect food ratio.
Right. But even lentils, you need time to prepare them properly.
And knowledge.
Yeah.
Like knowing how to cook them so they actually taste good.
Exactly. So imagine, a single parent working 2 jobs, trying to feed a family on a tight budget.
Suddenly those lentils aren't so appealing anymore.
Not really, no.
Which is interesting because Dr. Yeo calls this the privilege of healthy eating.
Oh, yeah. I like that.
It's not just about the money. It's having the time, the resources, the knowledge to make those choices.
It's true. It really makes you rethink the idea that everyone has equal opportunity when it comes to food.
So speaking of food choices, let's talk about those ultra-processed foods, those UPFs.
The ones that are basically everywhere.
Yeah. Dr. Yeo uses this system called the NOVA classification system.
Yeah, it categorizes food based on how processed it is.
So there are 4 groups, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's group 4 that gets all the attention.
The ultra-processed foods, like basically things made mostly from industrial ingredients and additives. Things you wouldn't usually have in your kitchen.
Like prepackaged snacks and sugary drinks, that kind of thing.
Right. But also like that loaf of bread you get from the supermarket, the mass-produced kind.
Wait, so even that's considered ultra-processed?
It is. And get this, over 50% of calories in the UK diet come from ultra-processed foods.
Wow, seriously?
Yeah, and over half of that is just bread, which I thought was pretty wild.
That is wild. Okay, so basically a lot of everyday foods fall into that category. But here's the thing. Dr. Yeo is actually kind of skeptical of the term ultra-processed.
Oh.
In what way? Well, he questions if it's the processing itself that's the problem or the types of ingredients they use.
I see. So, is it the fact that it's made in a factory that's bad?
Or the fact that it's loaded with added sugars and unhealthy fats?
That's a good question. It's a bit of a debate, right? He gives this example with yogurt. Plain yogurt is minimally processed. Most people would say it's healthy.
Right.
But add a sugary fruit swirl to it.
And suddenly it becomes ultra-processed.
Exactly. So it seems like it's more about the nutritional content than the factory setting, if you get what I mean.
I do. That makes a lot of sense. But then it also sounds like our brains might be part of the problem, too.
Definitely. Dr. Yeo talks about how we're hardwired to seek out calorie-dense foods. It's kind of a survival mechanism,
From back in the day when we were hunter-gatherers.
Yeah. He talks about how our brains light up when we see those yellow M signs on the motorway. That visual cue just triggers this
craving for those fast food fries.
Yeah. Even if we know they're not good for us.
So we're fighting against our own biology in a way.
In a way, yeah. Our brains are all about energy storage and survival. It's trying to protect us. But in today's world where calorie-dense foods are everywhere, that survival instinct can actually work against us.
Totally. And it doesn't stop there.
What else?
Dr. Yeo's research, it also looks at how hormones impact our brains and weight, especially in women.
Oh, right. Yeah. It's amazing how complex it all is.
Did you know there's a specific gene they've discovered that's linked to adult obesity?
No way, really?
Yeah. So genetics plays a huge role, too.
Yeah.
It's really making me rethink this whole idea that weight loss is all about willpower.
I know. And that's Dr. Yeo's point exactly right.
It's so much more than that.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so we've talked about food, we've talked about our brains, but there's one more piece of the puzzle we haven't discussed yet.
What's that?
Weight loss injections.
Oh.
Like Ozempic. They're everywhere these days.
Oh, yeah. They're shaking things up for sure. But like everything else in this area, it's not so straightforward.
Right, okay. So you mentioned these weight loss injections are having a big impact.
They are. Drugs like Ozempic and Mounjaro, they're becoming super popular.
But what are they doing exactly? Like, are they actually changing our metabolism or something?
Not really. What they do is they mimic certain gut hormones.
Okay.
The ones that regulate our hunger and fullness cues. So basically, they're tricking your brain into thinking you're full.
So you naturally eat less.
Exactly.
So they're like targeting those brain signals we were talking about earlier.
Pretty much. And the thing is, they're really effective. Like we're seeing people losing 15–20% of their body weight.
Wow, that's significant. But Dr. Yeo mentions that they work best with lifestyle changes, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. He's very clear that these drugs are not a replacement for healthy habits. It's more like they can help facilitate those changes.
So by curbing cravings and making it easier to stick with a healthier eating plan.
Exactly. And get this, Ozempic, they're finding it can help people quit smoking and reduce alcohol, too.
Oh, really? Wow. So it might have benefits beyond just weight loss.
It seems that way. Researchers think it's because they're impacting those same reward pathways in the brain that are involved in addiction.
So for anyone listening, have you heard about these weight loss drugs? What are your thoughts on them? It's definitely something to consider. But as always, talk to your doctor first.
And remember, weight loss is just one piece of the puzzle.
Dr. Yeo really wants us to think about overall health and well-being, right? Not just what we look like.
Absolutely.
All right, I am already feeling like I need to rethink some things about food and weight loss.
And we haven't even touched on the whole issue of misinformation.
Yes, that's next. We'll be back to talk about how to navigate all that noise online. So we're back. And man, even I'm feeling kind of overwhelmed by all this.
I hear you.
It's like between our brains tricking us, confusing food labels, and all that crazy misinformation online.
It's a lot.
It's a lot. Hard to know what to believe anymore.
Totally. And Dr. Yeo talks a lot about this problem, with all the misinformation out there.
Yeah, he actually wants more experts to get on social media.
Really?
Yeah, to counter all those misleading claims and give people actual evidence-based advice.
I mean, makes sense, right? It's kind of what we're trying to do here, too.
Exactly. Cut through all the noise.
Yeah. Get to the facts. And Dr. Yeo gives some great advice for spotting misinformation, those red flags. Like, be wary of anything that sounds too good to be true.
Oh, yeah, those lose 10 pounds in a week kind of things.
Exactly. Or those magic pills that promise you'll drop weight without even trying.
Right. If it sounds like a gimmick, it probably is.
Yeah.
But I'm curious, for you listening, how do you handle all this health info online? It's hard to know who to trust, right?
It really is. There's just so much out there. I mean, I always recommend sticking to reputable sources like scientific journals, government health organizations, universities.
Okay, so not just some random person on TikTok.
Yeah, probably not the best source.
Yeah.
And be wary of anything that relies too heavily on personal stories or testimonials.
Okay. Anecdotes, not evidence. Got it.
Exactly. And then you have those influencers who are always promoting their own diets and weight loss products.
Oh, yeah. That's a whole other can of worms.
It is.
Yeah.
And it's important to remember that a lot of those people have a financial incentive to push those products,
Whether they explicitly say it or not.
Exactly. So always follow the money trail, so to speak. Look for advice that's actually backed by science, not just someone's personal opinion.
Right. Evidence over opinion.
Always. And be wary of those grand claims without any real proof to back them up. That's a major red flag.
Good advice.
Aye.
Okay, so something that really struck me from Dr. Yeo, he talked about focusing on overall dietary patterns rather than getting caught up in every little ingredient.
Right. It's not about obsessing over that one cookie or that one slice of pizza.
Exactly. It's more about the big picture, right? What you're eating consistently over time.
Yeah. And that takes the pressure off. It's not about being perfect all the time. It's about finding a way to eat that's healthy, enjoyable, and most importantly, sustainable.
Totally. It's okay to have a slice of cake sometimes.
Exactly. As long as it's part of a balanced approach and you're not doing it every day.
Right. Balance is key.
Definitely. And Dr. Yeo makes a good point. Deprivation often backfires,
Oh, yeah. When you restrict yourself too much, you just end up craving those things even more.
Totally. And then you might end up binging later on. It's like setting yourself up for failure.
And what about stress? We all know stress eating is a thing.
Oh, for sure. Stress is a huge factor in our eating habits. Like when we're stressed, our bodies release cortisol.
Your stress hormone.
Yeah. And cortisol can actually increase your appetite.
No way, really.
Yeah. And it makes you crave sugary, fatty foods too.
Oh, so it's not just in my head. It's actually like a biological response.
Yep. Your body's basically in survival mode looking for quick energy.
Okay, so we got to manage that stress.
Exactly. Finding healthy ways to cope, like exercise, meditation, spending time in nature.
Whatever works for you. It makes a difference not just for your mental health, but for your eating habits too.
For sure. And remember, it's a journey. There will be days when you reach for that bag of chips or skip your workout.
Oh, yeah.
The key is to be kind to yourself, Don't beat yourself up about it.
Progress, not perfection.
Exactly. And remember, you don't have to do this alone. There are tons of resources available, books, articles, dietitians, therapists.
And of course, we have all the links to Dr. Yeo's work and other helpful resources in our show notes.
Definitely check those out, and don't hesitate to reach out for support if you need it. There's no shame in asking for help.
Okay, so we've covered a lot. Genetics, brain chemistry, food labeling, misinformation. But I want to go back to something you mentioned earlier, those weight loss injections.
Oh, yeah.
You said they're showing promise for helping people with addiction.
Right. It's a really interesting area of research. Like, we've mostly focused on how these drugs can help with weight loss, but they're also showing potential for helping people quit smoking and cut back on alcohol.
Which is huge. But do we know why that is?
Well, the leading theory is that these drugs, like Ozempic, they seem to affect those same reward pathways in the brain that are involved in addiction.
The ones that make us crave those things.
Exactly. So it's possible that these medications are somehow dampening that reward response we get from things like nicotine or alcohol.
Interesting. So it's like they're making those things less appealing.
Exactly.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
It sounds like these drugs could have a way bigger impact on public health than we initially realized.
It definitely seems that way. It's a really exciting area of research with a ton of potential, but it's important to remember that these drugs are still pretty new. More research is needed to fully understand their long-term effects.
Right, okay. So we've talked about what we eat and all the external factors that can influence our choices. But what about our internal landscape, like our mindset and our relationship with food? Dr. Yeo touches on that too, right?
He does. He talks about how our brains are literally wired to resist weight loss, especially when it's rapid weight loss.
Which makes sense from an evolutionary perspective, right? Like our bodies want to hold on to those fat stores.
Exactly. It's a survival mechanism that's been with us for centuries, but it definitely makes things tougher when we're trying to lose weight.
Totally.
Yeah.
And it seems like there's a lot we still don't know.
There is. Like, remember that gene we talked about earlier, the one they recently discovered that's linked to adult obesity?
Yeah.
Well, that's just one example of how much we're still learning about the complexities of weight management.
It's really fascinating.
It is. And it highlights how important it is to be patient with ourselves and to approach this journey with compassion and understanding.
I love that. It's not about beating ourselves up for our cravings or our struggles. It's about working with our bodies and minds to find what really works for us.
Exactly. And it all circles back to what Dr. Yeo said. Think about the health element to it, weight management, rather than how you look.
I love that quote. It's a great reminder that health is about so much more than just the number on the scale.
Totally. It's about how we feel, our energy levels, our mental clarity.
Our overall well-being.
Exactly.
So before we wrap up this part of our deep dive, I'm curious, did any of Dr. Yeo's insights particularly resonate with you?
That's a good question. I think for me, it was his emphasis on the role of genetics and hormones in weight regulation.
Me too. Like it really drives home the point that we're all different.
Totally. And there's no one-size-fits-all solution to this stuff.
And I loved his call to action for experts to get on social media to combat misinformation. We all have a role to play in promoting good information.
Absolutely. All right. So in the last part of our deep dive, we'll look at what we can do to support our overall well-being.
Yes. We'll dive into things like mindful eating, stress management, and how to cultivate a healthy relationship with food. Stay tuned. Okay, so we're back for the final part of our deep dive into Dr. Yeo's work. And now I kind of want to get practical. Like, what can we actually do to, improve our relationship with food and all that?
Yeah, let's talk action steps. One thing Dr. Yeo emphasizes is mindful eating.
Oh, yeah, I've heard that term.
It's about really paying attention to your body's cues and being present when you're eating. Which I know, it sounds simple.
It does. But honestly, Most of the time, I'm scarfing down food while doing a million other things.
Right. Like, how many times have you eaten lunch in front of your computer?
Oh, all the time.
Or, like, mindlessly snapping while watching TV?
Oh, guilty.
It's so easy to fall into those habits, you know? We're constantly bombarded with distractions, and we often eat out of boredom or habit rather than actual hunger. So mindful eating is about, like, slowing down, savoring each bite, and noticing how you feel.
So basically, instead of inhaling a bag of chips while watching Netflix, we're supposed to, actually taste them.
Exactly. Engage all your senses. Notice the flavors, the textures, the aromas. It helps you connect with your natural hunger and fullness cues.
So I'm guessing this takes practice, like a lot of practice.
It does. But like any skill, it gets easier with time. Start small. Maybe try putting your fork down between bites. Or like putting your phone away during meals. Really try to be present with your food.
That's a good tip. Put the phone away. Although, confession time. I usually take pictures of my food before I eat it.
Oh, yeah. The Instagram food pics.
Guilty.
Yeah.
But I like what you said about shifting our mindset,
Yeah.
from just fueling our bodies to actually enjoying the whole experience.
Right. And that enjoyment is key. Dr. Yeo really stresses that food should be pleasurable, not something that causes stress or guilt.
Which I think is a good reminder because we've talked a lot about avoiding those ultra-processed foods.
We have, but it's not about deprivation.
Right. It's about finding that balance, allowing ourselves to indulge sometimes.
Exactly. And deprivation usually backfires anyway. It just leads to cravings, and then you end up overeating later on. It's all about sustainability.
Totally. And speaking of things that make healthy eating harder, we got to talk about stress. Because we all know that when we're stressed, we tend to reach for the comfort foods.
Oh, 100%. Stress plays a huge role in our eating habits. Like we said before, when you're stressed, your body pumps out cortisol.
Right, the stress hormone.
And cortisol can actually increase your appetite and make you crave those sugary, fatty foods.
Ugh. So it's not just me being weak-willed, it's like my biology is working against me.
In a way, yeah. Your body is basically in survival mode looking for quick energy. So managing stress is super important, not just for your mental health, but also for your eating habits.
Okay, so we got to find those healthy ways to cope.
Actually, whether it's exercise, meditation, spending time in nature.
Or listening to a relaxing podcast.
Hey, there you go. Whatever works for you.
It all makes a difference.
Yeah.
Okay, so the big takeaway here is be kind to yourself.
Yes.
We all have those days where we slip up, right?
Absolutely. We're all human. The key is to just acknowledge it and then get back on track.
Progress, not perfection.
Exactly. And remember, there's so much support out there. If you're struggling, don't hesitate to reach out. There are tons of resources available.
Books, articles, dietitians, therapists.
Yeah. And of course, we have all the links to Dr. Yeo's work and other helpful resources in our show notes.
Definitely check those out. Wow, this deep dive has been so eye-opening.
It really has. I feel like I've learned so much.
Me too. Dr. Yeo's research is just fascinating.
It is. He really challenges us to think differently about food and weight.
And to question those simple messages we always hear.
Right, like the whole calories in, calories out thing.
Exactly. It's way more nuanced than that.
Way more.
Well, on that note, a huge thank you to our expert for joining us on this deep dive.
My pleasure. It was a great conversation.
And to everyone listening, thank you for being here. We hope you found this exploration helpful and maybe even a little inspiring. Remember, you are the expert on your own body.
Absolutely.
Trust your intuition, be kind to yourself, and never stop learning.
And keep those deep dives coming.
Until next time.
Thank you for listening to the Wellness Lab Digest. If you receive value from the podcast, I have 3 asks of you. 1, share the show on social media with your friends and tag the show at the Wellness Lab Digest on Instagram. Number 2, please leave a rating and review in whatever app you're listening on. And last but not least, please let me know what topics you would like us to cover in the future. You can contact me at empoweringmen.org/contact. And right now we have a free ebook to get you started on your wellness journey as well. That's empoweringmen.org/contact. To support this podcast, check out our sponsors at the bottom of the page or simply click the Support the Show link.